Welcome to the Spectrum Lounge podcast, where we discuss creatives of color disrupting the game in TV, film, and pop culture. I am your host, Rebecca Theodore-Vachon, and on this episode, we welcome back Robert Young as we discuss episode 1 of the Disney original series Loki. Hi, Robert!
Hey,
I haven't spoken in a while.
it feels good to be back, but
Oh, thank you.
it seems longer than it actually was.
Right? Because when was our last podcast together was the season finale of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So that was
Yeah.
like May. I feel like the season finale was in May. Maybe
Yeah,
like
like the first week, second week, something like
yeah.
that.
Yeah. So it's been and so of course we've been waiting like after that, after Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you were like drug addicts. Like, when's our next hit?
Yeah. And then they changed the day on us too. They're
Yeah.
messing us all up.
Why are they doing that? Well, we'll put a pin in that. We'll put a pin in
Mm-hmm.
that. But Robert is back. Robert and I will be back doing weekly recaps of the new original series Loki. They, like Robert said, the episodes air on Wednesday, which was a little weird to us because we've been used to the Friday releases with WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
So it's just sort of like, Wednesday, what are y'all doing? But yeah, I'm so glad you're back. I gotta tell you, I've been looking forward to this series because I'm a huge fan of Tom Hiddleston. I've always said that he's one of the best villains of the MCU because he's just messy. He's messy,
Yeah.
but also Tom Hiddleston just makes him so charming. Like even when Loki does the most despicable things, you're like, oh, Loki, why? But Tom just has this charm about him. So I was really interested to see like where they would go because we know the last time we saw him, well, Infinity War, we saw him murdered by Thanos because, you know, he basically sacrificed his life to save the people of Asgard and his brother, his adopted brother Thor. And then we saw him again in Endgame when the rest of the Avengers went back in time to retrieve the Infinity Stones.
Yep.
And we basically saw they went back to the end of the first Avengers movie when they had caught Loki, right? And then when he was down in the lobby, there was like some sort of mix up. Tony was supposed to get the Tesseract. But we saw the Hulk just busting through. He was mad because he couldn't get on the elevator. And so just as Tony had the suitcase with the Tesseract, the Hulk just came busting through. Tony went flying, and so did the briefcase with the Tesseract. And then Loki is just kind of like observing. He just takes the Tesseract, and we just see him, you know, disappear in a cloud of smoke, so to speak.
Yeah.
So this takes place immediately after his last scene in Endgame. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on episode 1 of Loki. What did you think?
They really hooked me. You know, can I be honest with you?
Yes.
I have never been much of a Loki fan. I really didn't start, liking the Loki character until Ragnarok. That's kind of really, once he kind of like made that turn to being, I guess I wouldn't say being good, but being, just trying to help Thor, and be a good brother. So I didn't really like the character till then, but I'm already hooked into this.
They've done their job.
Yeah, they did their job quick. They did their job quick.
Yeah. I mean, of note, the showrunner or the director of the Loki series is a woman, Kate Herron, and the writer is Michael Waldron. And I really love. I just want to say that I really love this. The way that Disney is veering, like as far as like their original series, that they all these shows have been helmed by women, right? WandaVision was helmed by a woman. I forget what her name is. For Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it was headed by Karen.
The director
Hoagland
was a woman. Yeah.
was a woman, and so this is a woman as well. I haven't seen too many articles talking about that, but I think that's huge. I mean,
Yeah,
hopefully
it
we'll get to
definitely
see.
is.
So what I'm hoping is that if this is the direction that Kevin Feige is going in as far as hiring women, because I think we're also seeing that with She-Hulk. She-Hulk is being helmed by a woman showrunner. Am I
Yep,
correct?
that's
Yes.
correct.
Well, I'll double check that. And so is Miss Marvel. The Miss Marvel series has
Yeah,
a, or is it a woman or
I'm pretty
one
sure
of
it
them?
is.
Yeah, I'll double check with that. But I am hoping that we will see this because we do know that we're getting an original series with Wakanda. Just sort of like
Yeah,
a spinoff of Black Panther. So I'm really invested in a Black woman showrunner for
yeah.
the Wakanda series. I mean,
I'd
I
be
was like,
really surprised if they didn't do that.
yeah, I mean, nothing against my Black brother directors, but I just feel like if this is the precedent that you're setting
Yeah,
with the other shows, then it just stands to reason that you should look like if you're doing woman, 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 then the World of Wakanda series should at least to me be a woman and should specifically be a Black woman or woman of color. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, but I will say this: I do think, and people could fight me on this. I think having women showrunners on these series gives it a certain spin.
hmm
Would you agree? I don't know.
I think I agree. Where
Mhm.
what makes you feel that way?
Well, just for instance, like particularly with the male characters, right? Like I'll
Mm.
use a perfect example. Perfect example to me is Falcon and the Winter Soldier, right?
hmm
Now we know that Bucky has sort of been like this very like tragic, angsty character. We know that he had been kidnapped by Hydra and brainwashed, and became the Winter Soldier. He became this assassin for Hydra for like what, over 5 or 6 decades or whatever.
Right.
But I feel like Falcon and the Winter Soldier was really the first time where we got, and I think this is what the series do so well, is like it's really giving us time to sit with these characters.
hmm
And the way that Bucky was written, I was just so fascinated. Like it was just like peeling layers back from him. and
Yeah,
so and so instead of him becoming like this sort of like cold alpha male assassin, we really got to see like this very vulnerable side of him. I mean, we saw some of that in the movies, but like that cold open of what was it, episode 5, where the flashback was in Wakanda, and he
oh
was with
yeah,
Io, and then she was basically testing to make sure that the deprogramming had worked.
that's one of my favorite scenes.
Baby, let me tell you, I was just like, when he just broke down crying, that just tore my heart out. And I was just like, I'm not saying that a male showrunner wouldn't have done that, but I do
hmm
think that women showrunners do, and I'm not taking anything away from their technical abilities. Absolutely, women directors have the technical ability, but I also feel that a lot of women directors bring a certain humanity and a certain sensitivity to male characters. Like I'm always
Yeah.
fascinated. Like for me, I've said this time and time again. I will finally be interested in a Batman reboot when they get
Mm,
a woman director
yeah,
to
they're
direct a
long overdue for that.
imagine a woman directing a Superman movie or a Batman movie, or or a Black Panther movie. You know what I
hmm
mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated by how women deconstruct male characters. And you would think that, I mean, wrongly, some men would wrongly assume that, oh, you're a woman. If you're gonna write or direct male characters, you're just gonna drag them through the mud because you don't like men. And I actually don't find that to be true. I actually find that women characters have a certain empathy and
Yeah,
compassion for their
I
male
agree.
characters. And
I
so
agree.
this is all to say that this is what I'm seeing in Loki.
Yeah, I mean, we
Um,
got that
mhm.
near the end of this episode.
Oh my gosh. What? I was just like, I really was not expecting that. I was just
Me
like,
either.
because remember, you and I had talked about this briefly in one of our recaps of Winter Soldier, is that, the Loki that is in this series is not the Loki who died in Infinity War.
Right.
That is 2012, right? 2012?
Yep,
2012,
2012.
Avengers villain wants to burn the world with the Shatari Loki.
Exactly.
That's where we're at. So I was very fascinated to see how the writers were going to tackle this. I'm like, are they going to just whitewash his crimes and murders? And I was very shocked to see that they were like, oh, we've got something for you, Loki.
Yeah, Owen Wilson went in on him.
So let's talk about some of the characters. Owen Wilson, he plays Mobius, right? Morbius, and he works for the TVA, which is the Time Variance Authority, right?
Yes.
So basically, because Loki took the Tesseract, that alerted the TVA, because they were like, basically, you're breaking the time continuum. There's just one continuous flow, and you fucked up the flow.
One sacred timeline.
One sacred timeline. So they take him in, and that's when we're introduced to Wunmi Masako. She is one of the enforcers. I forget what her character's name is specifically, but he don't play. I was like, oh my God. She just hemmed him up, because he was like, because what the funny part was when you saw disappear from the building in Endgame, and then he ends up in the Gobi Desert, and you see some of the inhabitants or the residents come out, so they see this weird white man in this costume, and then he gets up on top of a rock, and he starts his usual, I am Loki and I am burdened with glorious purpose, and they're just looking at him like, who the I thought that was so funny. And so he shows up, they just come out of a portal. Wunmi is one of the enforcers, one of the head enforcers, and when he tries to attack them, she just fucks him up, okay?
Yeah.
And then kind of puts this collar around his neck and brings him into the TVA. So I wanted to find, what did you think? Because I thought that it was hilarious to me. This whole idea of the TVA and Loki like stuck in this hellish bureaucracy was hilarious to me. What did you think of those
it was so good. And I love that scene of her capturing him.
Yeah.
Just the way they introduced the way that, she could slow down time and have him feel the pain, with I don't know if it was the weapon that causes the time to slow down or if they have something else that did it. But just introducing that was just so cool, and the way it looked and the way they explained it. Yeah. I love everything about this bureaucracy of the TVA, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about this.
Yeah. And I know there were some people that were talking about and I think they actually did a really good job with this, because the thing with these Disney series is that they're appealing to a few different demographics, right? They're appealing to us, right? The hardcore MCU fans, the ones we've watched all the movies at least 4 or 5 times, and we could break down everything.
Read the comics and everything.
Read the comics, exactly. And then there are the other demographic, people who may not have watched MCU movies, who have not watched Marvel movies, may not be too familiar with Loki and his storyline or his story arc within the MCU. And I thought that, particularly that scene in the TVA with Miss Minute, what is that? What her name was?
Oh my God! Oh, that was so good. That breakdown of the time stream and what the TVA does. That 50s like cartoon vibe. That was just so perfect.
It really was, because the thing is, that's the challenge for the writer, who is Michael Waldron, for by the way, because it's like, how do you distill 10 years worth of a story arc of a character and make it entertaining and make people not want to shut off or turn the channel, right? Or switch to another show. Yep. And I think they did a great job with that, because
I think perfect.
Yeah, like you said, by actually using the animation and actually making it funny. And so it was sort of like, because I was learning, because I'm not too familiar with the TVA. While I'm very familiar with the MCU and the characters, I really wasn't sure who the TVA was. And by watching that little cartoon he watched in like that DMV type of area, where he was like, take a ticket, and then Loki's like, ain't nobody here. But you gotta take a ticket anyway. So I felt like it was a really good, like, if you're someone who either watched it, have already watched the MCU movies, or someone who's just brand new, I felt like it gave you enough information that you could be like, okay, I see what the TVA is. Okay.
It was the perfect entertaining bit of exposition, like
Yes.
to give to people.
I do. I totally agree with that. Because sometimes we'll see, it's like what they call a info dump, like an exposition dump. You're like, oh my God, this is fucking awful. But I thought that they did a really good job with that. And just Tom Hiddleston's annoyance and everything. Like, how dare you? I'm a god. And they're like, you ain't nobody here.
And it was kind of scary and creepy at the same time. The Miss Minutes cartoon.
Yes.
Like it was entertaining, but it was a little scary and creepy. Like, yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, yeah. And I did want to talk to you about something really quick. And I don't know if this is intentional, but I feel like this is one of the things that I've been noticing about Loki from the first trailer and even watching the first episode. I don't recall seeing any white women. Pretty much that whole first episode was all women of color, from the Asian women that you saw in the Gobi Desert. And then you're introduced to Wumi Masako, Hunter B-15, right?
You are
Black
right.
woman, right? And then you're introduced to Gugu and Bathara, who's sort of like a judge, right? She works on the behalf of the TVA, another woman of color, and a black mixed race woman of color. And I was just like, hold up, I didn't see. And then from what I understand, Sasha Lane is supposed to show up.
Okay.
And she's a woman of color as well. So I thought it was actually quite fascinating that even though that this is a show, it's not technically a black show. It is very much a mainstream show. The main character is a white man, but almost all the women leads are women of color. And I would really love to ask, maybe it was Tom Hiddleston. Was that intentional? Is that something like in the casting? Like, I was really impressed.
That's super interesting. You know what? I hadn't thought of it.
I was just like, there might have been like, some of the Minutemen,
the I'm guessing, because we couldn't really see their faces or anything.
Exactly. So it's sort of like a reversal, right? Because, years ago, we were the ones that were sort of in the background. We would have been, Minuteman extra number 6, right? Extra number 6. And then now to see, and then what's interesting is that these women are like, they're in women of authority, right? Like they're the ones that are telling Loki what to do. And I'll tell you, I want to talk to you really quick about something just on this subject. And I wanted to get your opinion as a man watching this. I remember I watched episode 4. This was episode 4 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, right? That's when the Dora Milaje showed up. And that's when they had that huge fight with John Walker and Sam and Bucky, right? Remember they told Bucky
in the apartment.
They were trying to retrieve what's his name again? Zemo. And it was just a free for all, and this Dora Milaje just hemmed up everybody. But I was watching this episode with a male friend of mine, and he was like, he made an observation. He was like, I don't know if it's me, but I was getting a little bit of like an S&M vibe, like the interaction between Io and Bucky. I mean, we've already talked about how people are like, oh, Io's a lesbian. Yes, we know. But I'm just saying, as far as what we saw on screen, like there was a little bit of like a dominant, submissive sort of thing going on. And at first I laughed. I was like, oh, come on now. No, I don't think so. But then I watched the episode again, and then watching Loki, there's definitely some sort of
definitely feel that in Loki, for sure.
Yes, there's definitely some sort of dynamic between this white man and these black women that are just basically like tying him up, putting a collar on him. I mean, a collar around his neck. That is so BDSM. Like, come on now. You know what I mean? So I mean, I'll have to sit on this and like think about it some more. But because you and I have talked about the fact that, there's been this overall discussion about how like a lot of Marvel movies are like sexless. Like there's not like a lot of the characters, you don't see them have sex or whatever. Right. And I feel like Ragnarok, I mean, aside from Pepper and Tony, like, yes, but we never saw them doing anything. And the same with Gamora and Star-Lord. We never see them like waking up in bed together. It's more like we know they're together, they kiss, and that's it. But I felt like Ragnarok was like, to me, the first MCU
Oh my
movie
God.
that
It totally was.
it introduced like this element of kink that I was totally there for. I was like, okay, I know this movie is children friendly, but I think you, as the adults, I think we were catching a lot of things in
Oh,
Ragnarok, and I feel like Loki is kind of picking that up. I mean, we'll
yeah,
have to.
which is kind of
Mhm.
perfect, right? You know,
Yes,
that's the,
yes.
the Thor Loki bloodline, so it's kind of perfect.
I was just like, wow, he really likes being roughed up by these black women. But okay,
Yeah.
maybe I don't know.
Roughed
So
up, having it slowed down to, milliseconds and feeling the pain while it's slowed down. We
pain,
got all
yeah.
that going on.
I think we might. I think we might need to. I think we'll wait a few episodes and then we'll revisit this because I'm very. I'm not saying it's negative or positive. I just think it's fascinating. Like one that the
It
lead
really
women
is.
are women of color, and also they're in these like very authoritative positions over this white man. Which and like I said, when what was her name? Wunmi's character, Hunter B-15, when she was effing up Loki. And I was like, all right, if this is gonna be the new aesthetic of Marvel of black women just beating up white men, I am totally here
I'm
for
with
it.
it.
I love it. I love it
Yeah.
so much. I'm like, all right. Yeah. So anyway, so yes. So we see that Loki has been sucked into this bureaucratic hell by the TVA. And that's when and then elsewhere we're introduced to Owen Wilson's character, whose name is
Mhm.
Morbius. He's part of the TVA. And I think he was in like 1589. Am I bugging? Right? Because they can
Yeah,
go through
that was the
time.
first one they investigated.
Yes. So clearly he's on the case because there is some sort of time traveler who's also like a serial killer. Like he's basically hunting down the Minutemen.
Mhm.
So he traveled back in 1589 and killed some more. And so while Morbius is investigating that case, one of the other Minutemen comes through a portal and hands him a file on Loki. And Morbius is immediately like, okay. So he goes back to whatever time, and sits in on Loki's trial, who's presided over by Gugu and Bathara, who is
Mhm.
Ravonna Renslayer. I think that is like the dopest name
I
ever.
love
I
the
love it.
names.
I love it. Yeah, it sounds like a dominatrix name, doesn't it? See what I'm saying? All right.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
And
there. It's
it's
there.
there. Yeah. So somehow, Morbius goes up to Ravenna to Renslayer, was like, I got this. I think, whatever. We're not really sure, but he's kind of like, I think Loki can do this for us, right? Or something. So we're kind of figuring out what plans he has for Loki. And so he gives Loki like a tour of where they're at. And it's just this huge futuristic, like it's just amazing. Like the production value on the show is like they're not wasting any money on any of these Disney series,
No, you
right?
know what? It made me
Yeah.
feel very Jetson-y. Like,
Yes.
it felt
Yes.
like a retro throwback, but also super futuristic at the same
It
time.
didn't you felt that too, right? Like with the color,
Yeah.
it kind of had like with the circles, it kind of felt like that 60s Austin
Yep.
Powers type. But
Yep.
yeah, great point. Like but it's also futuristic at the same time. Yeah,
Yep.
I totally agree with that. And so yeah, so Morbius basically takes Loki into this room, into this chamber, and it's basically becomes a this is your life, where he basically
Mhm.
has a whole reel of Loki's life, is his not his best moments, but it's basically scenes from all the other MCU movies. I think they did a great job with that. And what happens, it becomes this scene where Morbius basically breaks down Loki
Yeah.
mentally. I've never seen anything like that before. I was like, wow.
It
All
was
right.
amazing.
Yeah, because Loki's all like, I'm a god, you can't whatever. And then Mobius is just like, all right, but just kind of using these reels. And he was like, for somebody who's supposed to be a god, you sure lose a lot. You know what I mean? And he was like, and then because in the beginning, because remember, this is 2012 Loki at Avengers, he was like, well, what do you want to do? He was like, well, I want to rule Midgard, and then I want to rule the Nine Realms. And then Morbius is like, okay, and then what?
Right.
Right? And then it becomes this really cool discussion about free will
Yeah.
versus control.
Yeah, I had that all written down, like free
Yes.
will or predetermined destiny.
So what did you think? What did you think about that? I loved it. What did you
I
think of that
I
scene?
loved it, and you know what I loved most about that Mobius character
Uh-huh.
is he when he was, you know, I call it an interrogation, but it didn't really feel. I mean, it's
Mhm.
still
It felt like a therapy
technically,
session. That's what it really
yeah,
felt
it did
like.
feel like a therapy session. But what I liked about it is like he
Yeah.
let everything kind of sit there. He kind of like
Mhm.
uh he kind of like manipulated the whole conversation like he
Mhm.
had all the time in the world, and you
Right.
could tell that Loki is so impatient. He didn't like to like sit with those quiet moments after he would like
Ooh,
ask him a question or
great
anything.
observation. Because he kept getting up. You're right. Yep.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Morbius acted like he had all the time in the world. He would just kind of like sit
Which he
back
does.
and
Which he
just,
does.
yeah, exactly. Part of the TVA. He would just like
Yeah.
put a question out there and let it sit. And that
Mhm.
would just really make Loki so uncomfortable. And of course, he comes back with his brash, fast, responses. And
Mhm.
Morbius would just like say something really slow, another
Mhm.
question that just kind of like it was really masterful to watch.
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting what you were saying about just like slowing down because that's Owen Wilson,
Yeah, it
right?
totally is. It
That's his
totally is.
MO. Every role that he plays, and I think he's a wonderful actor.
Hmm.
Every role that he plays, like the way that he doesn't like he's very chill. Not in
Right.
a Matthew McConaughey way,
Right.
but more like all right, let's think about this. Let's, you know what I mean? And so he's like
Hmm.
with Wedding Crashers, I thought that's why he was such a great balance to Vince Vaughn because Vince Vaughn is like, he's on 10.
Yeah.
And Owen
Totally.
Wilson is like the opposite of that. And he's such a quirky actor and his career has always fascinated me because he's just done all sorts of different roles and yet his quirkiness works in the MCU, which is of course
Oh,
is
it's
this
perfect in
yeah,
here.
it's this multi-billion-dollar whatever, and I love that Marvel is swinging for the fences with these very specific, quirky type of actors and directors. Like when you think of Taika Waititi,
Hmm.
like he was the perfect fit for Ragnarok. I don't think you could have gotten like a James Cameron or somebody more
No.
mainstream. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of Kevin Feige's uh, gifts and also the casting director is that they're like we're not really looking for like popularity, we're looking for what can you bring to the MCU, like your specific gifts or your specific character or your specific aura, what can you bring into the MCU. And
Right.
I think of like Julia Louis Dreyfus, like what,
Yeah.
like she's Val, like what,
Yeah.
like I think everybody was like blah, 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 Julia Louis in the MCU, but she's perfect,
She's
right?
perfect for that character. She is totally
Absolutely.
perfect.
I can't wait to see her with Sam Jackson. Oh my gosh.
Oh my
Um,
goodness, I cannot wait for that
another
series.
great actor who's had like these very quirky and specific roles, but he works as Nick Fury. So yeah, so I feel like Owen Wilson is like this great counterbalance to Tom's portrayal of Loki because Loki is just full of himself. He's just a gas bag. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
And Morbius is just somebody who lacks ego. You know what I'm saying? Like he's not
Yeah.
aggressive and he's just like, all right. You
That's
know what I mean?
everything. It's everything that makes Loki uncomfortable.
Yes. Cause
Everything
he's
that makes him
because he's good
uncomfortable.
with violence and aggression. He's much
Yep.
good with that. You
Yep.
know? Yeah, and so I really love that scene that and I appreciated that Marvel did that because again, I was wondering how are they gonna reconcile this version of Loki, right? Who
Mhm.
had just come off of doing some really awful things. And it was this moment of reckoning. And I'm really fascinated that in phase 4 of the MCU, a lot of these characters that we liked and we loved or whatever. But now in phase 4, it kind of feels like, especially with these series, now we have a chance to do a deep dive with them with 6 or 7 or 8 episodes. Um, and it's kind of like this deconstruction of who you are. Like yes, he was very entertaining, yes he was Thor's adversary or whatever, but it's like who is Loki really?
Yeah, they're really having to consequences. I mean, that's what
Yes.
we've seen in all these series so far.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. And
so.
it was just like, wow. And so, yeah, so somehow, I mean, during the midst of this, somehow Loki escapes. And we need to talk about this. So he somehow he gets a handle on the remote
Well, you
control,
could
but
see it when, he fell down and Morbius helped him up. You could see him
oh, that's what
feel
he
it.
did. God of
Yeah,
mischief. God of
doing
mischief.
total Loki things.
I was wondering how he got his hands on it. Thank you. You
Yeah,
caught
I
that.
noticed it. I was
Yeah.
like, "Yep, he just took it right there. He
Yeah.
totally
So
took it."
he ends up, teleporting himself out of that chamber. He finds himself basically in the hallway, and he basically approaches, sort of like this lower, just regular one of the cogs of the TVA, right? And
Yep.
he's basically like, "Listen, you're gonna help me get out of here. You're gonna help me break out of here, and everything." And so, what's interesting is, he asked the guy. Oh, his name is Casey. He's played by Eugene
Casey.
Cordero, and I
Yep.
love him. He's just like one of those workers, just like, yeah, I work for the TVA, and yeah. So so Casey basically is like, all right, what are you looking for? You're looking for the Tesseract? All right, I think I know where it is. So they go into this office. You see all these, more bureaucracy, all these, desks, like these very 90s, 50s, 60s looking desks in the
Mhm.
chairs. And then he opens up a drawer. He gets the Tesseract, but then Loki looks in there and Loki's like, wait a minute, are those Infinity Stones? And what Casey said blew my mind. He was like, "Oh yeah, we get those all the time. We just use them as paperweights." I
I
was like,
love how
"Oh,
casually he said it too. Oh my goodness.
wow." What did you get out of that scene? Cuz I like that kind of blew. I mean, it was funny, but I understood the levels to it.
Yeah, yeah, it totally
Mhm.
blew my mind, but it was kind of wild because you could see
Mhm.
the look, the look on Loki's face change so quickly, and
Yes.
he realized, like we realized watching it,
Uh-huh.
that like where he was at, the TVA location,
Yes.
is just like a whole nother level of power, and that
Yes.
everything that we knew and that he knew was
Mhm.
minuscule in comparison.
Absolutely, right? Because we're just getting off of the Infinity Saga, right?
Right. We just
And
had
then
half the universe get turned to dust.
it was just like, wait a minute, hold up, what? You're telling me these are paperweights in some like bureaucrat's desk, and they're like, it doesn't mean anything. And I love that because what it is what it's doing is it's basically, I don't want to say invalidating, but what it is what it's doing is that it's priming us for what's to come in season 4, and we're going to see that with the Eternals, right? With these,
Yep.
like, yes, the Avengers, they're powerful, but then they're like, oh no, we're about to take it to a whole other level. You know what I'm
They're nothing
saying?
compared to these gods
To
that
these
came,
gods.
thousands
Yeah,
of years ago.
right. Because don't the Eternals, aren't the Eternals sort of like connected to the Celestials as well?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
they are. Yep.
Okay. So yeah, I'm gonna keep saying this, man. People can say what they want about Marvel, but they know their shit. The
Yeah.
MCU, that nothing is gratuitous. Like every series is going to be connected somehow to the bigger, big screen version.
Yeah.
So it's not like disjointed where it's like, okay, well this show, but how about this movie? It's like, no, no, no. They're all connected. Like all of these shows are kind of like WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier and now Loki are all
It's
kind of
all connected.
yeah, they're all preparing us for like what we're gonna get in phase 4
That's
on.
the awesome thing that the Infinity
Yeah.
Saga gave us. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the Infinity Saga being so successful gave
Mm,
us this, phase 4 where kind of Marvel can do things what they want to do at their own pace and how
mm-hmm.
they want to do it. And it's
Yeah.
it's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll admit I was a little nervous for phase 4 because I was like, where do you go from here? Like after the Infinity Saga, you beat
Yeah.
the ultimate big bad. Like, where do you go? And they were like, we're not gonna stay here. We're gonna jump up. We're just gonna go
We're going to
above.
the next level.
We're going to the next level. So it's like Celestials? What? Oh my
Yeah.
God, because the gods for us in, phase 1 through 3 were like Thor, right? With
Right.
Asgard. And now they're saying that's invalidated. Like they're like, oh, those are,
They're just
you know,
aliens,
they're just aliens. Yeah, because Loki's powers don't work in the
Mhm.
TVA. And he is so annoyed by that. So anyway, he gets the Tesseract. The Minutemen come to try to retrieve him, and then he poofs himself. He basically teleports back to the chamber because he wants to see the rest of the reel. Because remember, Morbius had been showing him highlights of his life.
Right.
And so he decides to go back. Because I think what really shook him up was when he saw, it was the scene from Thor 2 when his mother died.
Mm-hmm.
That scene caught me because he didn't know. Like he didn't,
Oh,
because
that's
remember,
right.
he hasn't lived through that yet. Because
Right.
when he gets captured in Avengers, then he's brought back to Asgard, and that's when Thor 2 happens.
So basically, it was like seeing the future for him because he hadn't seen any of
Yes,
that stuff yet.
absolutely. And so it was like, and then to find out that it was his fault that his mother was killed. Because remember, he had made that double dealing whatever with the Frost King. What do you call them? I forget what
weren't
they're
they
called.
like frost giants or
Frost
something?
Giants, yes. And then to find out that his duplicity was responsible for his mother dying. Because whatever Loki can say, he loved her. And even as much as energy as he puts towards Thor, he loves Thor too.
Right.
And Odin, right? It's a very love-hate relationship. So
yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, Thor has a love-hate relationship with Odin.
Oh Lord. Yeah, so he goes back to the chamber. He teleports back to the chamber to see the rest of the reel. And that's when he sees his death in Infinity War when Thanos kills him. And the look on his face,
yeah.
Like to see your death.
Yeah, that's when it hit me. I was like, oh, this is
Yeah.
going real deep.
And when it was just like, we're about to get real with y'all. Like, it's all fun and games, ha ha ha. And then it's like, here's the real. And somebody had tweeted this, and I will have to give them credit in the notes. I'll have to find the tweet. But somebody had said that when you look at that reel, the final scene, it's not when Thanos crushes him. The last shot of that reel at the end of his life is Thor holding him.
Thor is like over him, slumped over him.
Yes. So the last thing that he ever felt or saw was the love of his brother. I'm trying not to cry. Of his brother holding him.
Yeah.
And I think that's when so then, when Morbius comes back, and I think that's when he finally has this breakthrough where he was just like, everything that I do, intimidating people, he was like, I don't enjoy killing people, but I know that fear is how I control people, right? That's the only thing I have to have control over people. But he was like, but really it's just a tool of the weak. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. Now we're getting somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Because that's really who Loki is. He is somebody who is so wrapped with jealousy and insecurity, right? Because once he found out that he was not the real biological child of Freya and Odin, you know what I'm saying? It was just sort of like, oh, you guys lied to me my whole life. I mean, he already had the rivalry with Thor ever since they were, little boys. That's just like a regular brotherly rivalry, right? Like, who's going to be king? But then to find out, like, I'm not even related to y'all by blood, and I'm actually like some blue giant, icy giant. You know what I mean? That just, I think it just heightened his insecurities.
Yeah, that was the last straw.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it was just like, I felt like I was looking at him for the first time. You know what I mean?
Me
like,
too.
Yeah, like he knows he ain't shit. Like, let's be real. He knows he ain't shit. And this is why he overcompensates. He overcompensates by being so arrogant and so aggressive or whatever, because he knows he's nobody. Right? Because isn't there a line where Morbius says, your failures is so other people can rise?
Yeah,
and you
he
see
totally
that picture,
said that.
right?
Of
And you
the
see the picture of the Avengers
where the camera's like circling all of them.
There you go.
Yep.
And that's all his life is like you play the villain to make the heroes stronger. And he was like that, and I think that's when Morbius has that breakthrough with Loki, and Loki was like, I don't want that tap. And I think that's when he asked Morbius, well, can I go back? And Morbius like, no, you can't go back. But what did you think of that breakthrough scene? I thought it was really beautifully written. I thought it was
it was beautifully written. And like I was saying earlier, this is really the first time that I've ever like empathized with Loki as a character at
Mm-hmm.
all. Like I empathized with him a little bit
Mm-hmm.
during Ragnarok,
Mm-hmm.
because I could see that he was starting to heal his relationship with Thor.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt a little bad when he got killed in Endgame, but it was more I felt for Thor than I felt for Loki.
Oh yeah, because he lost a brother. Yes, yes,
Right,
I
right.
agree. Yeah.
But this is the first time I've actually felt for Loki, and you could
Mm-hmm.
see that like this is going to be like a major change, even
Mm-hmm.
compared to when he died in Endgame. Like this is a
Yeah.
completely major change to the character.
And I think what Loki is unique in the fact that he gets a second chance, right? Because in the regular
Mm-hmm.
MCU timeline, he through Ragnarok, a little bit in Thor 2, although,
Yeah,
then he pretended to be his father or whatever. But
right.
in Ragnarok, you definitely saw him start to change. I mean, he did his shady stuff but once Thor was like, "No, we're not having that kind of relationship anymore," right? And I
Mm-hmm.
love that because he tried to trick Thor and then Thor was like, "No.
Yeah.
This is the game we keep playing and we're not doing this anymore." And I think that's when Loki really was like, oh, "Okay, so we got to change this relationship dynamic," right?
Yeah,
So there
and that
was
was part of like Thor's
yeah,
development during that movie that he kind
absolutely.
of realized that about himself.
Yeah, he's like, "Why do I keep falling for this? Like, why am I so?" No, he was like, "This is who you are. You're the god of mischief, and so I have to deal with you accordingly." You know what I mean? But there was definitely some sort of allyship that was starting towards the end of Ragnarok, and then when we pick up in Infinity War, when he destroys half the ship and half the Asgardians, that's when we really saw Loki really step up,
Yeah.
where he was just like, yo, like the universe is at stake right now. Like the fate of the universe is at stake right now. And he really took on Thanos. And I think he knew he was gonna die. I mean, listen,
Yeah.
he beat the Hulk, okay? So it's just like, and the Hulk beat up Loki. So let's do the math. So,
Right.
so I feel like he made like that final sacrifice. And so that was his redemption in that timeline. And now here in Loki, with and this is 2012 Loki. Now I guess with this show, he's gonna get another redemption arc. I mean, listen, we can talk about how white male characters get redemption arcs all the time, and I'm happy to talk about that.
Mhm.
But I am interested to see how I'm sorry, how Loki is going to come about, because I do like the fact that he is being held accountable for what he did.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And that's
Totally.
and that's the first step in redemption, right? It's not
Mhm.
just doing nice things. It's like
You have to own it.
you have to own it and be like, yo, I really did some effed up shit. And I
Mhm.
think looking at that reel of his constant failures and he was like, what am I doing? I think he was just sort of like, why am I wasting my life like for these things? You know what I mean? Like you have all these
Yeah.
abilities and gifts and you keep wasting it on like these
You could see it
ridiculous.
on his face. I mean, you
Mhm.
totally see that's what he was feeling on his just
Yeah.
from his expressions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so towards the end, remember in the beginning, we found out that there is some sort of time traveler who's, taking out the Minutemen or whatever. And so, Morbius basically makes a offer to Loki where he was like, maybe, if you want to do something, you can work with me because, we're being killed off. And then Loki was like, well, who is it? And he was like, it's you. We're like, what? I was like, wait
You
a
know,
minute.
what's interesting?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it was sitting out there the whole time that was him, but I didn't see it until
You
he
didn't see
said
it?
that.
That's
No, like when I
interesting.
went back and watched it the second time, I was like, okay,
Mhm.
when they went back to the 1500s and he was talking about the stab wounds and stuff, I was like, I should have known it was Loki then.
Yeah.
But I didn't think about it that first time through.
So I'm about to throw something at you. This might fuck you up. I'm gonna throw something at you, and you tell me what you think.
Okay.
Now, I believe it was either the head writer Kate Herron, one of the executives behind Loki, did an interview this week, and they confirmed that Loki in this series is gender fluid, because much like the comic book, in the comic book, we know that Loki is gender fluid, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or non-binary, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, when I watched that scene towards the end, right? That's when the Minutemen went to confront that other Loki, the one who's the time jumper. You couldn't really see him because he was wearing like a hooded cloak, and he was wearing like these kind of gloves or whatever, and then he kind of had the field soaked in gasoline and lit a match and burnt their asses up. But to me, when I was looking at that figure, I was like, that's not a man.
Oh, that would not surprise me.
You know what I'm saying? So they're saying it's Loki. They're saying Loki is gender fluid. And what I realized when I looked at IMDb, remember how I was listing all the women of color in the show? Remember I said Sasha Lane is in Loki, but her character does not have a name.
Oh.
She's only listed in 2 episodes, but there is no character next to her name. And I think that she is the female representation of Loki.
That
That's
would
my
not
theory.
surprise me, because I mean, there was, I don't know how long ago it was, but there was a run in the comics where there was a lady Loki.
Yes. And how fascinating that they picked a woman of color. To be I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, that's just
I think you're right. And it would be perfect. It would be perfect.
Right? Because I was just looking at the figure, the way that the figure moved, and the figure, because I was like, if it was just Tom Hiddleston's, they would have shown that, right?
Right.
But the fact that they kept this person in the shadow, and I was just looking at the way that the movement was, I was like, that's not Tom Hiddleston, and that's not a man.
That's a good catch. That's a real good catch.
And that's probably why they haven't been, that's probably why the Minutemen have not been able to catch this version of the Loki, because they're looking for a man.
They're looking for something else, yep.
So if Loki is like, well, I'm just going to time jump and do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to change my gender. Nobody would know to look for a woman Loki. They're looking for a man.
Oh, I hope you're right.
Yeah.
Because that is perfect for this character.
Yeah, and I really hope that this is what they do, because one, that's definitely a direction of expanding the MCU as far as gender expression and gender fluidity. And what I'm hoping is that with this, we can finally like have like queer characters. I know we are
like relationships and everything.
Yes, like we are supposed to have a queer couple in the Eternals, which is great. I think it's supposed to be Brian Tyree Henry's character with somebody else.
Yep.
Yeah. But I'm hoping that maybe this will be the time where it's like, it's about that time, guys. Like, you know,
and then we'll get America Chavez in the Doctor Strange movie.
Yes. And don't listen, please give her a girlfriend. Like, don't play with us.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Stop doing it's in the press release. Yeah, America Chavez is queer, but we don't see her with no girlfriends. I'm like, nah, come on now. I mean,
and listen, maybe they'll do it in the Wakanda series finally.
Yes, I think it's time. And I mean, I said this on the Vanity Fair podcast. I was like, Disney and Feige have shown themselves to be, they are unlosable right now. They cannot lose right now, at least for me. So I feel like at this point, you can put queer characters, and if people decide, if somebody's like, well, I'm not going to pay to go see a Marvel movie because I don't want to see 2 men kissing, then stay your ass home. And go get some therapy. But they're gonna make that money.
They're gonna make that money anyway.
They're gonna make that money, whether you like it or not. And with the Eternals coming out in November, and seeing a queer male couple, you know what I'm saying? I agree with you. I think Wakanda is the way to go. I think they can finally commit to Io having, a queer relationship, and just open it up and not be afraid. It's like, I feel like, if these parents or these Christians or whatever are gonna boycott MC, we don't need you. Goodbye. You know what I mean? Like that's really how I feel. It's like, go watch something else, but we'll be here with our money. Okay.
I totally agree with you.
And our viewership. Well, thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you for the invitation. Looking forward to episode 2.
Me too. I cannot wait. I mean, I'm waiting to see if my theory pans out. I'm gonna
I
cross
think it
my
will.
fingers.
I think you're
Oh,
right.
thank you. We're good with the theories. We're good with the
Uh,
theories. So we're gonna see that. So thank you everyone for listening to another episode of the Spectrum Lounge. See you on the other side.